Welcome to Parallel Lives. I'm Dimmer, and this is my co-host Levi.
Hello.
Today, we are talking about overcoming maladaptive daydreaming, specifically people who have already got it well managed and have overcome it. Talking about that with us, we have Luna, a 20-something-year-old American engineer, and Sar, a 25-year-old American man.
Okay, so what does overcoming mean to you personally? For example, do you still daydream?
When I think about like this question, and I think that this question is really important, especially for people who haven't sort of overcome it yet, who are still like in the middle of it, like I was when I was like in high school. I remember that when I was like really deep in maladaptive daydreaming, I was like, I was always thinking about what my life would be if I just didn't have daydreams, if I just like how much productive I would be, and talking about all of those things. And I think now that I'm kind of in this position that I say that I'm overcoming it. I have, for me it means that I am able to do the important things in my life. I think that I am able to do the important things that I have to do, the urgent and the important things, and I can do the non-urgent and important things if I sort of discipline myself or gain the motivation to do things. I can do those too, but sometimes like for the unimportant things, so maybe if I have like a hobby that I'm only marginally committed to, sometimes my daydreaming can get in the way of that. But for example, my daydreaming doesn't prevent me from doing the things that I have to do at work, or it doesn't like prevent me from doing like all of the adulting things that I have to do as an adult. And another example is my friendships are very important to me. So in the past couple of years, I've never turned down an invitation to hang out with someone in order to daydream. So when it comes to the really like important things that I value myself, daydreaming doesn't like come in the way of that. But I will still, daydream if I had like free time, or if I am sort of bored. I like don't have anything really else to do. And in some days, there are days and weeks where I would barely daydream at all. And when I say barely daydream, I would say like I would spend 30 minutes daydreaming. Like, you know, most people daydream and they have like sort of people mostly sort of have like daydreams like in between thinking things. And I'm talking about like all people, not just MDers. So I think I have things like that. Yeah, so there are days, are periods of time where I barely daydream at all. Where I'm like, going about life like a quote unquote normal person is. And, I go to work, I do my hobbies, I go to sleep, and I maybe spend around 30 minutes a day daydreaming. And then there are other periods where life is hard and I daydream a lot more than I would want to. But I'm not, even when I sort of relapse, I'm not like daydreaming all day. Like I'm not like, foregoing my work responsibilities in order to daydream. I'll still do those and maybe, go back to a daydream. But even in those bad times, it wasn't as bad as it was like back when I was in high school or middle school. So that's what I kind of define as overcoming.
And what about you, Sar?
To answer your second question, I do still daydream, yes. In fact, yesterday I was daydreaming about what I was going to say on the podcast, so that was pretty exciting. But for me, what overcoming would mean is that my daydreams are under sort of volitional control, that I only daydream when I mean to, and I think I'm getting closer to that.
That was a much shorter answer than my long ramble.
Man, a few words.
That's right. stoic.
How severe was it, before versus now, when you were in the thick of it versus now that you've got it more or less well managed?
Well, when it was most severe, it was when in my childhood. I kind of lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere without any real friends besides the animals. And so I spent a very large portion of my days daydreaming back and forth. But I've only really tried to stop in the last year. And that has been the period where I've made the most progress.
Yeah, and for me, I think I was the most severe mostly when I was younger. So, childhood and middle school up to high school, I would daydream almost all day. Although, like, I still like with school and stuff, I would still do things, but I was known as a really big procrastinator. I would do things. I know how much I could get away with my teachers, how late I can turn something in. I was still like a straight A student, right? But it's just that I kind of knew how to finesse those things and be able to procrastinate and daydream and then do my work, last minute. But most of my day would have been daydreaming because back then I didn't have that many friends, and I didn't do that many extracurricular activities after school. So usually once I get back from school, I just turn on some music and I would daydream all day.
Sar had mentioned that he'd been working on this for about a year. When did you start or make the decision to like kind of to address it, Luna? How long you been on this little journey here?
Yeah, so I would say that I started becoming uncomfortable with the amount I daydreamed like in late high school, so like junior or senior year. And so I really started researching techniques at my senior year of college. So that would have been about like more than 3 years ago.
How did you get to this point, and what method worked for you guys?
There's a lot of different things that I tried. So starting in my senior year of high school, I started doing a lot of mindfulness meditation. People have a misconception about what it is. They think that meditation is about like clearing out your mind, but it's more about being able to bring your attention back to whatever your meditation object is. And for me, it's like focusing on the breath. So when I started, I was only able to do 5 minutes, but now I meditate every day. I haven't. I'm usually not able to do like a really long streak, but I can meditate for at least 30 minutes a day, and I can sometimes go up to an hour. And I think that that's a big thing, not just like on a micro level. Like obviously, meditation helps on the level where if you have a daydream, or if you're kind of going into one, you can recognize that you're going into one and kind of redirect your attention somewhere else on that micro level. But also a on a bigger level, you have to be able to notice when you're daydreaming or what triggers your daydreaming, and kind of be able to work around those things. And so the second thing that really helped my daydreaming, which kind of connects to meditation in a way, is I started getting into philosophy. So I'm a very big practitioner of Stoicism, the Roman philosophy. And so a big part of what Stoicism teaches is like focus on whatever that you can control. And the number one thing that a person who is practicing Stoicism is practicing virtue, and that is the only thing that you can control and the only thing that you can do. So in terms of like my daydreaming, I found that it's not really about the daydream itself. It's about curbing the underlying desire that causes me to daydream. Like back in high school, I daydreamed about like being popular and having a lot of friends. So the first part of that is like I have to be mindful enough to recognize that that is what I'm daydreaming about. Like on a higher level, this is like a desire that I want. I want to have a lot of friends. And then you can go about it two ways. You can, figure out a way to get more friends, or on the other side, you can sort of curb your desire, like your unrealistic desire to be popular. Right, and that's kind of like the two ways I go about it, because you can't necessarily have everything that you want. Like, if I daydream about being like a famous rock star, maybe uh maybe I can go about, being in, trying to be in a band and stuff, but I can't guarantee that I'll be famous, right? But what I can do is be satisfied where I am, like try to be satisfied where I am right now and say, hey, it's fine if I'm not, famous one day. And sort of reminding myself of that whenever I daydream about being a rock star, then I would say to myself, hey, you want to, you have this desire to want to be a rock star, but maybe you're fine being an engineer. You're fine who you are, and you have friends that like you and want you to be, you know, you to be you, and be satisfied with that. So those two things for me go really, really hand in hand, meditation and in the philosophy, and really related to that, like cognitive behavioral therapy, because that's what a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy was based off of Stoic philosophy, and that's kind of how I got into it. So I do all of those sort of things in order to curb my maladaptive daydreaming.
I did not know that. I know CBT is recommended for maladaptive daydreaming, and I know that mindfulness is a part of it. I did not know it had some roots in Stoicism.
Yeah, it's so CBT was based off of what's called REBT. I think it's rational emotive behavioral therapy, and the guy who created that, he read a lot about the Stoics and read about their exercises, and that's very rooted into that. And now cognitive behavioral therapy is based off of REBT, and now ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, is based off of CBT. So that's the third wave of behavioral therapy.
Our guests out here in facts.
And how about you, Sar?
Oddly enough, I also did both meditation and philosophy, so strange parallel. I did do the mindfulness route myself, trying to sharpen the attention, trying to sharpen the presence, trying to be aware of your surroundings at all times in a sort of broad way, which really helped me. It helps me sort of catch myself if I am sort of drift off in a particular direction. I'll sort of be aware of my surroundings, realize where I am, what I'm supposed to be doing. And once I found the subreddit, I became immensely interested and started to do a little research on just the idea of the imagination in general. I started reading books by sort of some of the classic psychoanalysts like Freud and Jung, and trying to learn about what our imagination is, what it's supposed to do exactly. And then philosophy, I went more of the ontology or metaphysical route and asked questions like, is our imagination real? What is reality made out of? I kind of got lost on my own separate rabbit hole, but it was very therapeutic for me almost. I was able to learn, which is something I really like to do.
I'm so happy to be hearing people talk about philosophy and like the links to mindfulness as well. Because when it comes to mindfulness, like it's a great way to sort of stay rooted in the present. But like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm at that stage where I'm trying to practice mindfulness, but then like the desire to daydream sort of takes over, right? And it interferes with that, like on another level. But yeah, it's just I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But also, Luna mentioned the link to Stoicism, which is really cool because yeah, it just links really well, which I like.
Yeah, and another thing I want to mention about mindfulness is that I know that Eli Sommer is actually studying mindfulness meditation as a treatment for maladaptive daydreaming. I don't know if the study actually came out because I actually participated, but I never actually finished it because the study happened right before the pandemic hit. So everything got kind of messed up there. Mindfulness meditation is actually being like studied as a treatment for maladaptive daydreaming, and so I don't know if when that the results of that study comes out, that would be very interesting to see if they had results out of that.
I was also in that study. I was in the first wave. I didn't finish it either, not because of the pandemic. I was in the first round, so I was way before the pandemic. But because week 5 fucked me up. Yep. Had a breakdown. Couldn't do it. But yeah, it was heavily based in mindfulness, and it is not published yet, but it will be soon. He's been talking about it in some of his more recent videos, about their findings. They're, getting their data together, getting ready to publish. So it should be out in the near future. If just for the viewers, go to the ICMDR and sign up for their little newsletter. There's a tab there that says news, and you can subscribe. They do not spam you, but that's where they publish links to a lot of the papers that are coming out about maladaptive daydreaming. So if you want to stay up to date on the latest publications, that is a good subscription to have. So stepping back a little, I think you guys kind of touched on your reasons before, but getting deeper into them, like what really motivated you to want to overcome or manage or address your daydreaming to begin with, because that's like a finding and keeping an internal motivation to keep going or to even start is just so hard for a lot of people. So what was yours? How'd you come to it? How'd you find that?
Well, for me personally, I found the subreddit and realized what I had been doing all my life was not normal and probably not healthy. And so I set out to try and fix it. I sort of had a moment where I realized retroactively how much time that I spent daydreaming, and that probably most people didn't do that. And so from that point on, I sort of decided to, research, try and learn about it, try and figure it out intellectually, but also to try and really focus. I had already been very interested in mindfulness, to really drill down and focus and try and sharpen my attention and just focus on presence.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of a similar thing. Like, I think if I didn't know that maladaptive daydreaming was like, something that normal people don't do, like it probably wouldn't have motivated me to try to fix it. But I found out about daydreaming like a lot earlier in my life, like in middle school, I believe. One day I just like Googled the symptoms and the wiki page came up. And then after reading about it, I found like the what was that website called? The Wild Minds forum. I don't know if anyone was on it. It's very, very old.
Oh yeah, I'm still there. They're under new management now.
Yeah, I got the email. They're under new management, but like that was like basically the original forum for maladaptive daydreaming before it became big on Reddit and Tumblr. And it really surprised me because when I kind of sort of managing my daydream, I kind of got out of the online community, MD community, for a while. And then when I came back and like saw the Tumblr and the subreddit, I was just so surprised about how many like new terms there were. One, the community's gotten way bigger, and two, we have like distinct vocabulary and distinct ways of talking to each other, which was very surprising to me. And I'm pretty sure like this will be studying in the future, like the way that maladaptive daydreaming as like a concept, like as like we are a mental health community that doesn't have like a diagnosis, and so we found community in each other and sort of grew. I think that that's definitely going to be like someone 20 years from now studying, the online communities of maladaptive daydreamers. So I think that's interesting. But back to the question at hand. So once I found out that maladaptive daydreaming was like, like a mental health issue, I was like, oh, so this isn't normal. This isn't what normal people do. And so I think in high school I started getting really frustrated with how much time I was spending daydreaming. And part of it is it's kind of like maladaptive daydreaming was like a self-fulfilling like cycle, in terms of like a lot of what I daydreamed about was that I wanted friends, but because I spent so much time daydreaming and not actually like, trying to manifest, y- and try to get friends in real life, I just continued, you know, desiring getting friends, and I kept desiring that, and I kept daydreaming, and so I wasn't really getting out of it. And so I think that's what really like drove me to try to change something. I felt like I would regret my life if like 20 or 30 years from now I wake up and I'm like, I'm still doing this daydreaming thing. Like I'm still, I've lived my life and I barely have anything. At the end of the day, like daydreaming doesn't produce anything. If I spent all that time daydreaming, it's still in my head, and then when I die, like there's nothing to account for it. And so like really that kind of existential thought of like me looking back at my life and saying I really don't have anything to account for, that really motivated me to start doing something, to start going about like changing my life and trying to curb this maladaptive daydreaming thing.
Existential dread, the great motivator. I'm going to go back a little bit just to expand on something you brought up, which was the community and how we've grown. It's actually something I'm really interested in too, and I've made a couple of videos about. But in terms of motivation, it sounds we kind of have this habit. I definitely have this habit of telling people that if you didn't think it was a problem before, it's probably not a problem. Like chill out. But that's really not always the case. Because even in my case, you don't connect that it's the daydreaming that is the core problem or part of the core problem. So you don't know you're supposed to be addressing it. So you might not think of it as a problem. But anyway, okay. You had said that you can picture the growth of our community as something that people will study in the future, and it's kind of already has been or started. There's a paper called The Micropolitics of the Legitimization for a New Mental Disorder, I believe it's called, something like that. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't read. I haven't kept up with the papers at all. You guys are like so like, I know you guys post in the Discord like whenever there's a new study coming out. I'm like, man, I really should get get good at being. Although I think that's another aside that's kind of related to this. I think that's also interesting as well. Like we as a community are just like collectively reading medical papers about our own like uh mental illness. Like I think that's like such an internet, like that's something that couldn't happen like 30 years ago.
That is exactly what this paper is about. It is about the bottom-up movement of the medicalization of maladaptive daydreaming, because it was not psychiatrists who said, "Oh, hey, we should I've noticed something here. Let's do something about it and categorize these people." It was us. And that paper is essentially how we bully Somer into taking up the mail. That's us. That's who we are. We get so far off track. Sar, what's your motivation?
My motivation? Wow, I don't know. I'm not sure I have a great answer for this one. I suppose I just want to live a more fulfilling and engaged life. Not spend so much time fantasizing and more time doing. in being.
Do you remember the moment when like the tipping point where you had started to read things where you went from oh, it's whatever to oh, this is a problem? Like was there a moment or was it a gradual process?
I'm not sure there was a particular moment, but I did remember sort of just retroactively being like, aha, thinking back to my childhood, thinking back to all the times I'd kind of spent just thinking about stories. When I was a young lad, I was really into Naruto, and I would spend hours and hours and hours just thinking about it, running around my barn with my headphones in like a madman. So I already had these sort of mindfulness goals in mind. I'd already been sort of into the philosophy, into the mindfulness. I've read quite a few books by a bunch of monks and stuff, and so I already had this goal, but this sort of pushed me over. I have this sort of a challenge to overcome, and I suppose that's what motivates me.
Halo's in the audience. Like I had a Naruto paracosm too.
Me too, honestly.
Hey, there we go.
Cool. So from when you decided to address it as a problem towards or to the end of or to the beginning of when you felt that you are truly starting to get more control over it, how long would you say that took?
I don't really have a timeline, but for me, real results started occurring when I started with some concrete methods. Like I was very interested in the classic psychoanalysis, and they're very big on dream interpretation. And so I started doing daydream interpretation. And so when I would kind of get down or I'd catch myself in some sort of daydream, I would actually get out a piece of paper and like write down what happened, how I felt about it, and then I'd try to interpret it. I would try to say like, what does this mean for me? And after a while, I could go back and read those, and I started to see a pattern. Right, I wanted to be admired. I wanted to be thought of in a positive way by my peers or seen as being talented. These sorts of things, and I realized, right, that this might be some kind of unconscious process. One part of me talking to another through my daydreams, and that I better get started on being admired, being talented, or this is going to be kind of a wasted time, perhaps. But it is when I did concrete processes that I started to see improvement. When I started to do daydream analysis, or I would, I just ask myself questions. Like if I caught myself daydreaming, I'd say to myself out loud, in fact, where are you? Who are you talking to? These are sort of embarrassing questions to answer, but sort of really settled things in my mind that I am here in the present and I am talking to myself. So after those sort of very concrete, that's when I started to see improvement, is when I actually, I would write things down or I would ask questions. That's when I started to see actual improvement. That's when I started to be more focused.
It's interesting that you mentioned, writing down what you were like. People write down what they dream and stuff like that, but like writing down the type of daydreams that you have is something that I never thought about. But yeah, it's an interesting approach to figure things out. So yeah, cool.
Well, and the important thing for me was writing down how I felt about my daydreams. Like not only their content, but like, how did that make me feel?
Be your own therapist,
Yeah, in essence.
Yeah, sort of just getting behind the emotion.
I always considered like psychoanalyzing my daydreams as completely useless. I don't know. I think you're probably the first person I've run into, Sar, who's done it and managed it successfully and got something positive out of it. I'm sure there's other people, but like the first person I've directly talked to. And I don't know. I feel like I probably shouldn't be surprised, but here I am.
I do sort of a similar thing I don't do it as explicitly as Sar does, where he kind of writes down like, you know, try to extract like the reason why. Although I don't explicitly like make that explicitly write it down, but I kind of do the same thing where I sort of notice like there's a recurring theme in terms of like content. If I can't tackle it in real life, if it's not something that's actually like attainable, then I try to tackle it from within. Say, is that really something that I actually want, or is it do I just have a perception that I want this thing? Is this actually a desirable thing that I should want?
Let's let's talk about like relapse. How do you get through that? Sar, what do you do when you when things get hard, when it tries to come back full force on you?
In particular, the practice that I elaborated earlier, where I just ask myself questions out loud, is in particular something that helps me. And then I told my fiance about this, and she will catch me. She'll just say, "Hey, you're talking to yourself again." I'm like, "Damn it, you're right. I am." And so I suppose I try and be better. I don't let it get me down.
You know, that's a question we did not even think to like put on our little base list. But support. I mean, outside support. You have your fiance. I mean, are there other people in your lives, family, friends, therapists, or whatever, who are helping support you through this?
Yeah, actually, I told my other best friend, I told my fiance, I told one of my best friends, and they both told me like, "Oh yeah, I've seen you do that before." So maybe it's a little more apparent from the outside. And certainly, I didn't realize the extent to which I like will mouth words and make facial expressions, which is what other people will catch me doing,
Hmm.
and then they'll just gently remind me that I'm kind of off in my own little world.
So yeah, for me, most of kind of like Sarah, like most of the people I mostly interact with, they know that I talked about my maladaptive daydreaming with basically all of my friends. I remember this in college a lot. Sometimes the people that I sort of interacted with and told let them know about maladaptive daydreaming, when I have like a bad relapse, they would automatically understand. For example, like if I was just really stressed out or really anxious, there was this one time I like my friends and I were out at dinner, and I needed to daydream, but I didn't have like any headphones to listen to music, and my friend recognized that that was like I asked her for her headphones, and she recognized that that was what I needed it for. And she let me she gave it to me and she let me daydream it, but afterwards she like when I talked about it, she said, "Oh, I understood that like you needed to daydream." And so there were situations like that, where the people around me are kind of understanding of where the sort of the weirder behaviors come from. And other than that, like we don't really talk about it. And it's the pandemic, so I would go days without seeing people. So I don't really, as of right now, I don't really have someone to kind of like pull me out like Sar does. So that's been and this goes back to the relapse thing. uh I think I've been relapsing a lot since the pandemic happened, because of the fact that I live alone now. And so I really don't have my kind of the social support that I used to have. And I kind of realized that when I do experience relapse, like I tell myself, I used to be really hard on myself whenever I relapse, but now now I'm a lot easier on myself. And when I think about maladaptive daydreaming for me right now, it's basically the same as a mildly behavioral, like a mild social media addiction, which honestly, like most of the population, especially in our sort of age range, like they're mildly addicted to social media. Like they might have like they might be like slightly uncomfortable with that, but they don't like, they're not like extremely hard on themselves. Like, oh, like you weren't disciplined enough and you looked on Facebook today. And so taking that into perspective, like I sort of look at my daydreaming in the same way. Like I don't look at my daydreaming as something exceptional, right? I just say, hey, like if I daydream, that's kind of like the same as like someone who like wants to stop going on Facebook, but they took a look. So just being like accepting of myself, that has really helped whenever I relapse.
Yeah, I agree. It is not sustainable or healthy to be ragging on yourself constantly. Failure is part of the process.
So, what would you say are the differences? Well, I suppose we sort of touched upon this with the first question, but what are the differences between when you had maladaptive daydreaming, and after when you didn't?
I suppose I'm in kind of a weird space. For a while there, at least at first, yeah, I read this a great book by Russian philosopher P.D. Ouspensky called In Search of the Miraculous, and it's a very sort of mindfulness-esque focused book. But in it, he's very adamant that imagination is the enemy. Like you need to stay away from daydreaming. It's basically wasted. The definition of wasted time is only focusing on that. And I was in that space for a while, but I don't quite. I've gotten a little beyond that, and I think I don't want to be against my own creative faculties. I don't want to be compulsively daydreaming or doing it because that's just what I do. But I want to be able to also use my imagination and to make my life more exciting, more interesting, and also be able to sort of come up with ideas for stories. I know many people like to write, and I've been trying to do my best to take these stories that I have cultivated over many years and try and actually put them down into words. And that's been exciting, or perhaps a little bit therapeutic. I read another book which I really like, and I would suggest for maladaptive daydreamers if they're interested in the sort of philosophical side of things, called The Lost Knowledge of the Imagination by Gary Lachman. And it's about people who were poets and playwrights and artists, and how they, before the modern age, thought about imagination and how that they could use their sort of creative faculties in the world, not only to sort of not to escape, but to sort of make the world a little more profound from the inside out.
I think that's a good point. You don't want to. There's no reason to work against yourself, and even if you're not creative, I really don't think that daydreaming is like that. The way that author was thinking. I'm not very good at reading studies and understanding them, but from what I understand, it's healthy. It plays a role in a healthy mind. So even if you are not going to use your daydreaming creatively, I'm just gonna say I honestly don't think that getting rid of daydreaming should be a long-term goal of anyone's.
I completely agree.
Yeah, it's a function of a normal, healthy mind, and even if you are not going to use it, you need to embrace that or accept that it's something that needs to happen to keep you sane.
Yeah, I guess everyone daydreams, and so like curing you can get rid of the maladaptiveness, right? Like
Hmm.
the part where it really interferes with your life and stuff. But you can keep hanging on to the daydreaming aspect, because that's normal. Like everyone would daydream, but it's more like focusing on the maladaptive and getting rid of that.
Yeah, and to that point, and this is how I'm gonna answer this this last question here about the differences between like the before MD and the after MD. Um, a very interesting thing that sort of happened to me that I think was sort of the starting point of when I felt like my maladaptive daydream was changing is that when I was in college, I kind of realized that I had lost the ability to create paracosms, and like I had a really long recurring paracosm, and the other characters were people that I knew or people that I wanted to be friends with. But when I actually entered college, and I started socializing a lot more, and I had a lot of a big group of friends, and I was like really into the college experience. I had realized that I lost that particular paracosm, but also since then I have never like created a paracosm like ever again. Like I might daydream it as like a one-off session, but I wouldn't go through the lengths of like redoing a scene and changing different aspects of the story and like having like different scenes. Like those things don't really exist for me anymore. And so and then so the second question you might be wondering, like, what do I daydream about now? I actually daydream about sort of normal things. I would daydream about like the past a lot. Like I would relive moments, like really happy moments that I had with my like friends, or relive like a hangout, or I would like think about something that's gonna happen in the future, or I would have like one-off daydreams where I'm like a rock star or something, or and the interesting part about it is like even when I'm not daydreaming and like if I'm just thinking normally about work, I would still pace around and mouth out words, and I would still do like the things that used to be associated with maladaptive daydreaming, but I would do those things with normal behavior. Like I would just be thinking about, oh, I need to wash the dishes, and I would be pacing, you know. I haven't going back to what we were talking about before, I haven't thought about like getting rid of like most of the daydreams that I have right now. And I haven't thought about like, getting rid of like the pacing behavior and the mouthing behavior, because I'm like, it doesn't really negatively affect me. So I think that's probably the most interesting thing that's happened to me since I've tried to like get rid of maladaptive daydream. Just the fact that I lost my ability to create paracosms, and I haven't, even when I relapse, I don't relapse into daydreaming about a paracosm. Like I just relapse about like into a one-off daydream, or into thinking about like, you know the past or something like that. But I've never gotten back to daydreaming the way that I did in high school.
I think that the way we phrase that question really emphasize the real life part, like how different is your real life from then to now. But you bring up a good point, like how different is your daydreaming, which you already answered, but I was wondering about SAR.
I really don't go for grand narratives either, really. I have stories that I'm sort of working on, I guess, in my head. But for the most part, I try my best to, particularly if there's like, I suppose I daydream about normal things too, but I try to keep away from them if they sort of cause me negative emotions. Like if my daydream is about arguing with somebody, which happens on a fairly regular basis, I'd say. That is the sort of thing that I try and keep away from, because it affects my mood, and trying to keep away from that sort of thing.
We're getting kind of close to the end of our time, but we did have some questions from the audience. So if you guys are cool with that, I'm going to throw those at you. So what methods didn't work for you, if any?
I think that like all of the approaches that I have, even though I don't think that a single method that I worked is like the entire reason that I don't maladaptive daydream right now. I think a lot of those methods I kind of learned from and like, kind of took from. But I guess the method, if I would say a method that didn't work, is just like white knuckling it, like just saying like, "Oh, I'm just gonna stop daydreaming," and just go cold turkey on daydreaming. That you know that has never worked for me. Um, and if you don't address those root problems and you just try to address the symptom that is maladaptive daydreaming, it's never gonna work. Um, and a second thing I want to mention about methods that kind of did work for me, I would say work on your coping mechanisms just in general, because for me, like when I go through hard times now, I don't need to go to a daydream in order to get out of it, because I am confident that I can get through it by myself without daydreaming, because I am confident in my own coping mechanisms. And I think that confidence in that I have in myself, that I could get out of whatever situation that life throws at me, that has helped me stay out of daydreaming.
We have another question from the audience. How stressful or difficult was it during recovery?
I would say it was stressful. In fact, I think it was pretty good for me in a lot of ways. It made me feel better. I was no longer, like I said earlier, I would no longer sort of engage in these daydreams where I would argue with people, or somebody would wrong me, but only in my dream, and I would be upset. It would affect my mental health. But now I sort of I'm not going to say that I'm beyond it, but I'm able to sort of nip it in the bud or realize what I'm doing. It's actually been a net positive. As for difficulty, it can be difficult sometimes, and other times it's super easy. Sometimes I just sort of have a moment of clarity. I kind of realize I'll transition, which is very strange, by the way, from the difference between being in a daydreaming and being out of one in a moment, and you sort of realize, oh, where am I? What am I doing? But once you sort of you break that, it's not particularly difficult at all.
Yeah, for me, I think that I think it was difficult for me to sort of transition out of daydreaming all the time. And one of the biggest reasons is like just inherently, like when I'm daydreaming, like everything it's basically kind of like a control thing. You control you control the narrative, and you control everything. And so like, and then when you switch out of daydreaming and into real life, you realize you just don't have control of a lot of things, right? You have to sort of get used to the fact that you know you don't actually know what's going on in other people's minds. In real life, you never know what's going on in another person's life, and you have to deal with that. That's the joys of being a human, and having and relating with other humans. um and so it's honestly like kind of like a completely different mode of thinking when you transition out of daydreaming all the time to starting to interact with the world, knowing that the real world really isn't like your daydreams. And I think that was really hard for me, and I think that would probably be really hard for a lot of people.
Um, I totally agree, but I would also like to add that sometimes the world can surprise you, and other people can surprise you in positive ways, right? That sometimes it
Oh
can
yeah, definitely.
go above and beyond even your wildest dreams.
So our last audience question isn't actually a question. It's a comment. They're talking about the Discord server. This server and the voice chats have been good for me socially, to give me a place to talk about MD, since I don't talk to people IRL about it. If people don't have a social support group IRL, I'd recommend the Discord community. Yeah, I agree. I have, like Sar, I have told my significant other, and they are supportive, but we don't really talk about it a lot, and I don't really want to. He's supportive in different ways, and online is really where I talk about it. In the Discord, on the Reddit, Tumblr, I'm everywhere. And it has been very helpful. It's given me a language with which to describe what I'm going through. It's given me people to relate to, even friends, and a creative outlet as well, a little bit, to talk to create for other people. We're doing the podcast, or I have a YouTube channel. Just content, anything, posts, replies to posts. It doesn't even have to be artistic, just to talk to somebody. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I do highly recommend communities, any community that suits your needs. Go be social.
Yeah, it's just to find like-minded people where you can talk to a complete stranger and you'd still be able to say, "Damn, well, I relate to everything that you're saying. Like the way you feel is exactly how I feel," which is such a weird thing with the maladaptive daydreaming community, because we're total strangers, but we just get each other.
That is, unless anybody has any final thoughts, comments, questions.
I actually do have a final thought. I'd like to sort of add something to what Luna said last, and that is that in addition to the world, right, we have a model or an idea of ourselves, right, in our daydreams, like what we can be, who we are, and that in the world we can also surprise ourselves with what we're capable of. And so I'd like to the people in the community to keep that in mind.
A good note to end on.
Cool. So that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, we appreciate all the support. People who comment on the podcast videos on YouTube, just engaging with it overall, sharing, everything like that. So thanks for that. If you are interested in taking part in some of the podcast episodes, then please feel free to go to the Discord server and then give yourself the podcast role. You are also welcome to just sit in and listen to the podcast when they're being recorded and ask some extra questions. So yeah, there are links in the descriptions for social medias and to the Reddit probably and things like that. And yeah. I completely forgot what I was gonna say when I read that.
Never vibed with anything so hard. I will probably link to that.